Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, Paul here, and you guys may or may not know, Maximum Crisis was actually the last set in the Arc 5 era of packs. So that started in August 2014 with the Duelist Alliance, and basically it's taken us on this really long journey to Maximum Crisis. And so I wanted to reflect a bit on all of the different new cards, archetypes, game trends that we've sort of experienced in the last 3 years. And I honestly think that looking back, the Arc 5 era has been one of my favorites. I mean, I really like the Zexal era, I really like the 5Ds era, but I think that the Arc 5 era, in terms of the metagame, competitive cards, really brought us a lot of new things. Although we did lose a few things on the way, but yeah, you'll understand more when I get into it. So, the first thing is, targeting kind of became irrelevant, over time. Basically, we started to get more and more cards that just outright couldn't be targeted by card effects. You think of things like Cosmos, like Forerunner and Dark Destroyer and stuff. Things like Magispectors, an entire archetype of monsters that just couldn't be targeted. And even the small stuff like Dante the Pilgrim. These, in a sense, were the cards that sort of made Castel, which came out in this era, but made Castel kind of less and less relevant. Silent Honor Arc less and less relevant. And as a result, too, things like Effect Veiler and Breakthrough Skills sort of slowly fell off, as well as Compulsory Evacuation of Device, Dimensional Prison, all these sort of cards, these one-of cards that targeted a monster and did something, no longer were really as big of a deal. You had to kind of field wipe, or you had to do some sort of non-targeting removal, because otherwise the monsters were just resistant to it. And that's one of the things I'd say I probably don't like as much about this past era, is just the fact that, you can't target anything. It's not as much like that now, but still it really was for a long, long time. So that's definitely the number one thing, or not like the best thing, but the first thing. The second thing, and this is one thing that I really like, is that we got a really nice mix of summoning mechanics. And this was something that I was kind of afraid of when the era started, because, it was like, oh, pendulums are coming out. But from the outset, pendulums weren't actually the dominant deck. For a while they were in different forms, but we actually had a nice mix of Xyz summoning, Synchro summoning, Fusion summoning, Ritual summoning, and Pendulum summoning. And so it was really cool. You had like a period of time where the top decks were like Burning Abyss, the Teller Knights, Shaddols, Cleforts, and Necroz, and they just, plus, with Yosenju and Ritual Beast and stuff on the side. So you kind of had these decks that were like, one of them did a really good job of Xyz summoning, or several of them did. One did a good job of Synchro summoning. We got archetypes like Yang Zings that were really focused on that. Then you had like Shaddols and Ritual Beast doing the Fusion summoning, and the Kraz doing, of course, Ritual summoning, and later like Cyber Angels and stuff like that. Plus Performance Palace, Cleforts, all that stuff that did pendulum summoning. So it was a nice mix, because in past eras, whenever a new summoning mechanic happens, it's like the game kind of centralizes around that. But we haven't really had that problem in the Arc 5 era, and that's something that I appreciate. The next thing is the Ghost Girls. So these kind of are the new age of hand traps. Ghost Ogre, basically, Ghost Ash, or Ghost Ogre, Ghost Reaper, and Ash Blossom. That's the three of them. So yeah, Ghost Ogre came out, and at first people were like, is this really a good hand trap? It doesn't negate. But then we've kind of been realizing it's really a great hand trap. Getting rid of cards in the field is super valuable for dealing with, field spells, continuous spells, and traps, outing powerful monsters rather than just negating them. Ghost Reaper, basically tearing down extra decks, making decks like ABCs and decks like Burning Abyss really kind of like cry, just because you can turn their entire strategy off with it. And then most recently Ash Blossom, which just straight up, says no to searching, says no to like, sending cards from the deck to the grave or summoning from the deck. So three really powerful hand traps that really crept out things like Effect Veiler, things of old. I mean, obviously Max C still made it through, but he's gotten limited. So this era definitely brought us those three hand traps. I'm wondering if we'll get more, even though that era is over with, and I suspect that we will. Also ignore whatever is happening upstairs if you can hear that. It's people doing stuff. Anyway, though, thing number 4 that I really liked was legacy support. So in this era, we got really a load of like focused legacy support. Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, Red Eyes, Buster Blader, and even Blackluster Soldier. All of these really old legacy cards got a lot of support that made them, in some cases, competitively viable. Like in Blue Eyes and Dark Magician's case, they're actually like pretty decent decks that can do well in tournament. But all of these got, just cool retrained monsters, right? Like Dragon Spirit of White, Ebon High Magician, and Ebon Illusion Magician. All those cards. Red Eyes got the new fusion stuff. Buster Bladers Blackluster Soldier. And what's actually really cool too that I like about it is similar to the thing I was mentioning before, they each kind of represent different summoning mechanics. So Blue Eyes mostly focused on Synchro Summoning, Dark Magician got Xyz, Red Eyes got Fusions, Buster Blader kind of got a mix, and Blackluster Soldiers, of course, Rituals. So it's really cool that none of them use the Pendulum mechanic. I feel like that was a good way to stay true to kind of what they were in the anime. They wouldn't have used Pendulum Summoning because they wouldn't have known. So I thought that was really neat. Now, the fifth thing is one that I don't quite like so much about this era, and that's that we got kind of this new age of unbreakable boards. Basically, decks being able to pump out so many, just difficult to deal with monsters all in one turn. Cyber Dragon Infinity and Totally Awesome are key examples. We've also got, Rafflesia, Dark Law, Crystal Wing coming out really easily from Ultimaya Zulkin. And it just kind of got to that point where some decks would make boards you simply couldn't break. When you think of that deck like Pepe that could just summon kind of everything under the sun and then have counter traps behind it, it was just like... And that's something I really, like I said, don't care too much for. Unbreakable boards don't make it very fun to play, but that is a defining factor of this last era. Probably more the second half than the first. Next thing is a thing that I kind of like, I don't want to say I don't like it, I kind of do like, I don't know, is Kaijus. So this is the, Kaijus definitely defined, I'd say, the Arc 5 era, the latter half of it, being able to basically just out stuff. We've already had things like Lava Golem and stuff like that in the past, but I think with Kaijus, it kind of reached that point where it was like, these cards can actually work in your own deck, they're searchable through their own spell that's also a dark hole, and they, don't use your normal summon like Lava Golem does. So Kaijus in a lot of ways were sort of the savior, but then also maybe sort of not, because people really don't like the idea of working hard to get a boss monster out and then just kind of having it get Kaiju'd. So yeah, I have mixed thoughts. I think that Kaijus are cool though. I like them as an out. I'm glad that they've kind of gotten hit on the ban list, but we'll see kind of where that goes. And the next thing is another thing I definitely don't care too much for, is that trap cards got crept out, I feel like, in this era. And maybe crept out's not the word I should use. Maybe I should say centralized, like over-centralized. Because I think back to, the Zexal and especially, 5D's eras where traps were still a very prevalent part of the game. There were lots of different ones. You had Compulse, Deprison, Torrential, Bottomless, Call the Haunted, made lots of appearances. Solemn Warning, of course, came out, but there were several other, stopping cards that existed. Not so much in this era. This era started out with some traps, but it eventually just kind of became, Solemn Strike and then like Dimensional Barrier, to the point where sometimes that was a trap lineup, was just 3-dimensional barrier, and that's my traps. Or for a long time, it might have just been like, my trap lineup was like a warning and 2 strikes, or just 3 strikes. And, during the Pepe times, Guiding Ariadne could just search your strikes and your warnings, and it's just like, well, that's the only traps you need to run. They're searchable, and that's really the end of the story. Now, we did get some cool traps. We got the variety of mirror forces, like Drowning, Quaking, Blazing Mirror Force. Those are all really cool. And we got new trap holes. Floodgate Trap Hole is, I think, the biggest one, but also Time Space closer to the beginning. So, we got lots of really cool traps, but unfortunately, most of them didn't really end up seeing a lot of play, and that's a bit of a shame that, traps got so over-centralized to that point. But yeah, so defining characteristic nonetheless. And also, TCG Exclusives got really, really crazy in this era. So this was kind of, in the past we'd had TCG exclusive cards that supported an archetype, Dark Grepher or Charge of the Light Brigade come to mind. But this, and they also had things like Noble Knights, which were kind of more in the Zexal times. But this era really turned the TCG exclusive archetypes up to 11. With Burning Abyss kind of becoming the longest lasting competitive deck for a long time. And also, Cosmos started out kind of this deck's whatever, then got really nuts. Also Spirals and Subterrors, which have been pretty tame compared to what the past two were, but still, they're really good in their own right and really interesting. And then, Kaijus, yeah, they're technically a TCG exclusive archetype. It has been a really interesting thing that sort of defined us from the OCG, is that, we have Kaijus and they kind of don't, so that's neat. And the next thing is 60 card decks. And this is really maybe more like the tail end of the game or of the era, but yeah, you know, that grass looks greener actually makes running more than 40 cards a totally viable strategy. Infernoids, of course, come to mind, but also you've got like those 60 card Lightsworn decks that thankfully most people can only run online because, you know, Minerva is expensive. Thumbs up for reprints though. And, you know, 60 card Paleozoics, plus just your generic like 60 card zombie decks and just all these little things where they're really interesting. I am not gonna lie, I don't care too much for you know, the 60 card thing with like that grass. It's just really annoying when they amass that much advantage on you in one turn, but it definitely will be kind of one of the things that people look back on and say that this era brought to the table. And the last thing for me of the Arc 5 era was just this sort of advent of engines. And again, this was closer to the end of the era, not so much the beginning, but basically, you know, I've made a video on this where there are just so many engines in the game right now that a deck can almost feel like it's just comprised of that. You know, we had things like Clown Blade, we've had things like, you know, the Terratop engine, where just those alone can support an entire sort of set of Xyz, either rank 3 or rank 4. What is it? Like with the Wind Witch engine, the Brilliant engine, the Zodiac engine, Kaijus are like an engine almost. And you know, I have like mixed feelings. Like I said, I think it's really fun that decks can feel kind of original and creative and stuff. Oh, don't make forget Invoke, that's a big one. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, sometimes it sucks to not actually even be facing a deck, just an amalgamation of cards, but that's definitely something that's cool, and I think that will be extending into the future of the game. So yeah, that concludes the 10 biggest takeaways, in my opinion at least, from the Arc 5 era. All in all, I think it's been a really fun time. We technically still have a couple more packs coming out, like to sort of polish it up, but Maximum Crisis was the last main series set. Then we get to say hello to V-Rains and Link monsters, which, different video for a different time. But yeah, so what do you guys think? Have you enjoyed the Arc 5 era? You liked what it brought to the table? Did you like it at first and then you didn't like it? Did you hate it at first and then began to like it? Just yeah, what are your takeaways or your favorite and least favorite things? Let me know down in the comments. And that's going to be it. So remember, you can follow me on social media, thumbs if you like the video, subs if you love the video, and I think that's all I got to say. So I will catch you guys in the next one. Later, guys.